All right, so it is the moment so many of us have been waiting for. We finally just got word on the Breonna Taylor case. The grand jury has indicted one of the former officers involved, Brett Hankison. He's been charged with first-degree wanton endangerment. The other two officers are walking free. This is in relation to the fatal shooting of 26-year-old Breonna Taylor back in March. Kentucky's capital, Louisville, has been in lockdown in preparation for the announcement. The city's downtown businesses and offices are boarded up and barricades have been placed in the streets. There's also a 9 p.m. curfew in effect for tonight. Now, Erica, I didn't know what that charge was. You know, we don't have an attorney on here. I looked it up. The maximum, Erica, is 5 years, a $10,000 fine. Again, this is the maximum. And you can bond out at $15,000. What do you make of this, Erica?
You know, this is... It's really complicated, to say the least. First of all, so it appears that the AG Daniel Cameron is saying that the officers did announce themselves and they did knock on the door before entering the home. That's something that we have had a lot of conflicting reports on. Obviously, waiting for this verdict or the indictment to see if who and what was going to be indicted was something that we were all kind of waiting for. For me, I'm just so frustrated. I'm really frustrated. Okay, Daniel Cameron just spoke and basically said that, you know, there's nothing he can offer at this point. That's the problem. You haven't offered anything. It's been over 6 months since this woman was killed. He keeps referring to it as a tragic loss of life. A tragic loss of life implies that it's an accident. This is something that could have been avoided. There was no regard for her life. And now you're only indicting one officer. So it does appear that they are going to take to the federal level in terms of the civil rights violation. The state level, they'll deal with the criminal investigation. But it's incredibly disappointing what's happened at the city level, especially because the backstory is, and this is just coming from what I have heard and what I have read, is that this was done in an effort to gentrify the neighborhood that Breonna Taylor was living in. So to that point, I just want people to remember that regardless of what pops up in that neighborhood, it will always be covered by the blood of Breonna Taylor.
Yeah, I just think, you know, to Erica's point, I think was such and is such a big cultural movement right now. I mean, everybody knows the name Breonna Taylor, and then having this come out, one officer indicted, maximum, what would you say?
5 years.
5 years. So this isn't the answer that people were looking for. But if you look into this case and you look at the court of law, standing back, I understand me saying this, people are going to fire back at me, but if you look at the court of law, did they say they were coming in? Didn't they say they were coming in? That's something for a jury to decide. Did they shoot first? Did someone else shoot first? Again, that's for a jury to decide. I understand the cultural significance of this case and what it means in this movement, but when you bring it into court, it's going to be very hard to prove against this officer or just one officer in particular that he was wrong, because they had that warrant and then it's he said, she said about the rest of that. So we're going to have to see how this plays out in court, but I feel bad for the city of Louisville tonight, just because,
too. Yeah, you know, I just did get, not to cut you off,
no,
and thank you for
yes,
that explanation. Yes. I just got word from our producer that they do have a witness claiming that they did hear the officers announce their entry. Whether or not there's other, witnesses that say conflicting reports,
right.
Again, that's for the jury to decide. But TBL Nation,
I do think that it is really important, since we are saying this, that the officers announced themselves, that this are people who were sleeping. So how much have you heard? If you only heard someone bust through your door, would you have heard an officer announce themselves? I certainly wouldn't have. So the only thing that you would have to do is deal with what you are experiencing, right? Yeah. I mean, I want to just throw that out there, because whether they did or they didn't, it really doesn't come down to anything if you're sleeping.
No, that's a good point.
And that's a great point. But again, this is all something that they're going to have to, you know, put the evidence towards in court and let that jury decide.
Right. No, and we're getting a lot of your comments right now saying you're sick, you're in shock. We have Deborah on Twitter saying, I worry that riots are what's to follow. We have Bill on Twitter, that's one officer too many. And then Ellen saying they might as well have let him go go free. Our country's in so much trouble.